It's pretty common in Football Manager to go out there, sign a player that you think is going to be a world beater for your team, only for them to join and not really play anywhere near the level you'd expect them to. It almost feels inevitable and like there's nothing you could have done to have fixed the situation, but let me tell you, there is. There's a lot of things that people ignore before signing a player that will give you plenty of indication as to whether a signing is going to be good or not. So today I'm going to try and help you with that and tell you everything that you should be considering before you sign a player. That way you can make sure you always get the best transfers for your team. That's right, today we're going to cover everything that you should be thinking about before pulling the trigger on a transfer, before spending your money on a new player. As mentioned, there's plenty of things that people ignore or don't even know exist that can affect whether a player is good or not. So often we just look at the star rating and the price of a player and make our decision based on that, but there's a lot more that we should be considering as FM players. But before we get into all of that, if you do go on to enjoy this video, if you find it useful, please go ahead and smash that like button for us to give the video a boost here on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below if you've got any questions or anything that I might have missed in this video that you look for when making a new signing. Now, for the purpose of this video, we'll be using my Wolves save, which is 5 years in the future. That way we've got a load of new gens to take a look at as opposed to players that you might already know a little bit about. But if you do want to check this rebuild out, it's part of a video from my channel, which you can find linked in the description. Over there, we're pushing for 40k subscribers, getting very close now, so any support would be appreciated. But after this video, of course, because you don't want to miss out on the information we've got. But let's get in to the first thing that you should be looking for when signing a player. And we will start with the obvious thing, the thing that a lot of people will look at without checking out anything else, the star ratings and the attributes on screen. You would think by looking at them, you pretty much get a good idea as to whether this is going to be a successful signing, but I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot more that you should consider, but let's start off with this. So obviously you're going to look at the star rating, you're going to look at his price for that rating, and also, particularly with young players, you're having a look at their potential. If you've got one like this where it's got a potential of 5 stars and it's got 4.5 gold stars, that's a player that, if given the right development, is going to be a top level player for your club. So for a team like Wolves in the Premier League, this is very promising. Obviously he'll need game time, he'll need development, but if you were just looking at this, you'd see a player with 5-star potential with decent attributes at 19 for 7 million and assume this is a good signing. And he very well might be, but there's a lot more that we should be looking at. So outside of those basics, what else should you be looking at? Well, once I've checked out the basics, I'm looking at 2 things straight away. The first one is a player's determination rating. If this is too low, there's a good chance a player isn't going to develop, particularly important for a younger player. That's not to say if this guy here had 3 determination, he wouldn't develop to his potential. It might just be a little harder to get him there, it might take a little while longer, and there's also room for issues to crop up down the line. As you can see, determination reflects a player's commitment to succeed and do his very best both on and off the pitch, so that's during a match, that's during training, and for that reason I will always take determination into account when signing a player. If there's 2 wonder kids, one that looks like he might have a bit more potential but has 3 determination compared to one that might not look as good but has 17 determination, if they were very similar players, I'd go for the guy with a 17 determination because I just think he's got more of a chance of reaching that potential at a quicker rate with as minimal issues as possible. So for that reason, determination shouldn't be the be all and end all, but you should definitely be looking at it, and it coincides nicely with also looking at a player's personality. Now these are things that I know a lot of you guys will take a look at. Some of the things later on, not so much, but I know there's some people that ignore this completely. They just look at the bright greens for, you know, finishing, for pace, for dribbling, and that's great. That's not to say that a player with low determination or a poor personality won't perform well in game. They definitely could. It's just something that I really think is a hallmark of a good player, a player that's going to develop and perform well for you on the pitch. Of course, you can get exceptions, players that just work really well in the in-game engine, but always check out their determination and their personality too. Their personality is going to influence, again, the kind of character they are around the club, the chance they've got of reaching their potential. It's made up of a bunch of hidden attributes that you can't see without the in-game editor under the hood that determine what kind of personality a player has. For example, Juan Marquez here has a good personality of professional. That means he's probably got a high level of professionalism, again a hidden attribute that you can't see on screen here, but when you scout a player you will learn their personality, so that's a good chance for you to get an idea of the kind of player they are in their hidden attributes, because without the editor you'd have no way of knowing. So always check out their personality. And if you look at my squad, I've added a filter on here to show you all the players' personalities. We've got fairly professional, fairly determined, balanced, we've got spirited, resolute, professional and model citizen. And even though you want to aspire to have all of these great personalities, having something like balanced isn't too bad. It wouldn't put me off a player completely, but there's some players that can have potentially negative personalities. Check out this new gen here that a scout report has said looks like a great player, and if we looked at him, he could be a good pickup, but when you see he's got a personality of mercenary, it just makes you think a little bit. Doesn't mean we should rule him out completely, but mercenary likely means he's got low loyalty and will want to leave the club at the earliest opportunity as soon as someone comes knocking, which isn't something that we necessarily want. Maybe it will be if you want to sell him on for a profit, but you just need to take note of it. You don't need to rule the player out completely because of their personality, their determination, or anything else we cover in this video, but you want to be aware of it, because if he did have a low determination, if he did have a poor personality, I'd start thinking otherwise and maybe looking at other targets and trying to find someone better. So always take those into account when you are trying to find a new player for your team. And whilst we are talking about personalities, in case you don't know, you can potentially alter them through mentoring. So if you have a leader in your club, like we've got Giovanni Fabian here, who is a team leader and a model citizen, he can help some of your other players try and develop their personalities. So Michael Nichols is learning from him. He's got a resolute personality and is getting a significant effect from Fabian. So hopefully over time we should see him gain some determination, gain a better personality, which will help him in his career. So that's just something to take note of. If you aren't happy with a player's personality when you sign him, it can be changed, it just might not always work. So now we've covered those, let's move on to the next two things you guys should be looking at, and these are ones I know a lot of people ignore. Firstly, injury proneness. This might be one that you do look at. It's one that you should be focusing on, particularly if you're signing an older player sometimes, or even it can happen with younger players too. In your coach report, sometimes you'll get this kind of image here that will indicate whether a player is injury prone. The darker the colour of this circle, if it's orange, he's got a pretty high injury proneness rating. If it's red, it's going to be very high. And whilst that doesn't mean he's going to be injured guaranteed, it means he's more likely to get injured, and you're going to have to try and maintain his fitness more than you would a standard player. So it is a risky thing, particularly if you're spending big money on someone and they can get injured. Matthias Cunha here is a player that in this case, I don't quite think he's injury prone, but he just has an injury at the minute. But he is someone that does get injured quite a lot, and it's something you should be looking at when you go to sign a player. Check out their cons and make sure there isn't anything about injury proneness, because if there is, it's something you might need to bear in mind. If you're spending 100 million on a star player, giving him 200 grand a week, and then you find out he's injury prone, he's going to spend most of the season injured, it's not going to be a good transfer for you. And whilst people do sometimes look at that, one thing they very rarely focus on is natural fitness. And this is particularly important if you are signing an older player, maybe as a free transfer, or maybe you're spending a bit of money on someone who you would consider past his prime, but you think might still be pretty good. Well, always check out their natural fitness, because as you can see, natural fitness determines how well a player stays fit when they have got an injury, but also how likely they are to maintain their physical attributes after they go past their peak later in their career. So if you were to take a player like Thiago Silva, for example, already retired in this world, but he would have had a high rating for natural fitness. James Milner, another one, if he was playing, he'd have a high natural fitness rating because he has been going for so many years. Even in his older age, he's still able to keep up some of those physical attributes and continue playing at a higher level, whereas some people peak a little bit earlier and maybe retire at say 32, 33 because they start losing their legs physically. Here's an example of a player that's currently playing. Aymeric Laporte is 34 years of age here, but because he's got 15 natural fitness, his physicals haven't declined all that much, and even at 34, there's some pretty good attributes. Whereas if you were trying to sign a player like David Neres here at age 31, if you didn't take note of his 10 natural fitness, you might not realise that he is someone that might start declining quicker, and you might buy him thinking he's got a lot of pace on the wing, but by the time he's 33, he might lose it all. You might not have as many years left in the tank as you might think, so it's always something to take note of. At the same time, it does link hand in hand sometimes with injury proneness. David Neres, as we can see, might have problems with injuries. That low natural fitness isn't going to help him, so always take note of that. You don't want to be spending big money on a player that might be a liability or might not last for a few years in your team. So you've looked at a player's attributes, you've taken note of his ability according to the star ratings, even if it's not necessarily always fully accurate. You know about their determination, their personality, and if they're going to stay fit for you, and you would think that would be enough, but there's still plenty of other things that the game almost tries to hide under the hood that can have a huge effect on how a player can do for your team, and these are the ones I think a lot of people ignore without even knowing they exist. So let's start with the first one, and that is adaptability. So we're looking at a player player here, Guillaume Pearson, playing for Reims, already a French international, age 20. Amazing ability, great potential, fantastic attributes. But you can see in his coach report there is something we should take note of, and that is this image here that looks like a luggage bag. That's adaptability, that's a hidden attribute that you can't see without the editor, but your coach report can give you an indication, and this determines how well a player might adapt to a new country if they were to move. And this can play a role in a few ways in your saves. Firstly, if you're trying to loan a player out for some development that you already own, but he has low adaptability, keep him in the country, because if you send him out on loan to another country, it's going to take him a long while to get up to speed. You'll start seeing worse performances and they won't develop so much. And it's the same when you buy a player. If they have low adaptability, it's not the be all and end all, but you have to accept they won't take like a duck to water to your team, and it might take them a while to start playing to their full attributes that you can see here. Now, there are some exceptions. This guy is so good that I think I wouldn't really care if he struggled a little bit to adapt to the country over time, because even if he wasn't playing at his best, he would still be playing pretty well with these kind of attributes. So it is a bit swings and roundabouts. You need to consider all sides of the coin. If he is a generational talent like this, you might be able to accept the adaptability. So it's just something to take note of when you are signing a player. But there's two other hidden attributes that I think will have an even greater effect on whether you deem a transfer to be a success or not. Again, they work in the same way as adaptability. You can't see them without the in-game editor, but they will appear in a coach report to give you a general idea of a player's rating in that section of their game. The first one is one I've spoke about many times on the channel, so I won't go over it for too long, but consistency. Basically, if a player is inconsistent or has a low rating for consistency, they won't play to their attributes on a regular basis. If a player had maximum consistency on a regular basis, he would play to what you can see on screen. If it was a pro in his coach report, it would be a good thing. If it's in his cons, it means he's not actually going to play to this level on most occasions. It's one of the biggest reasons you guys sign players and then realize they're not actually as good as you thought they'd be, because they're not actually playing to this level at all. If they've got low consistency, they're not actually going to be able to use these attributes to that level. Their physical attributes aren't affected, but say their first touch, if they've got low consistency, might show as 15, but in game, they might actually be playing at a 13 or a 12 on some occasions. Hopefully that makes sense. If you do have any questions about consistency, let me know in the comments, but it's certainly something you should take note of. Again, in this kind of situation, Pearson here, even if he wasn't playing to his maximum every time and was a bit inconsistent, even a little bit less than his maximum is still going to be a very good player, so you might be able to ignore it, but it's another thing that you should take note of. But another attribute that is hidden and you have to use the coach report for, that a lot of people ignore again, is how a player performs in big matches. It's called important matches, I think, the actual attribute, as you can see, and this player here, Dodo, relishes big matches. So when we're playing against Man City, Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, he's going to play at a good level, whereas a player that has a low rating for important matches is going to kind of shrink away and not perform as well on the big occasions. There's plenty of examples of this in real life, but you want a player that enjoys big matches, particularly if you're a big team. There's going to be a lot of games that are big matches, Champions League ties, clashes against the other best teams in your league, whether you're in Serie A playing against the top sides there, or in the Premier League playing against the top 6. You want a player that's going to be ready for those occasions and perform at a top level. Now, if you get someone that has great important matches and high consistency, there's a good chance you're going to get some great performances. But there is one other thing that I think a lot of people ignore that can kind of throw all of these out of the water and just give you a clear indication as to whether a player is going to be good for you or not. And it's very simple. It's something that I always do when I go to sign a player, is you just go onto their history tab and look how they've performed, because the chances are if you've got a player with high consistency, high important matches, great determination, whatever it is, all of those things are going to lead to a player performing well on the pitch. Whereas if you look at a player, think he's great, but actually check, and at his current club, he's maybe not doing as well as you might have expected him to, that might be a good sign there are some issues under the hood. Now, with a younger player, it's not as easy to judge this kind of thing, because Pearson here could have been playing a lot of the times off the bench. He's also maybe not playing for the world's best team in France. You need to take all of that into account, but you would still arguably expect that a player with those attributes should be playing a little bit better than how he is there. Let's go back to that player that we looked at earlier. He's got a low rating for adaptability. He's not going to like come into this country too much if we were in a different nation to him. He's not the most consistent player in the world, and whilst he might might look like an absolute gem, if we actually have a look at how he's performed so far for Racing Club, it's not been the best. Played 2 times, played 1 time, and not really performed at any kind of great level. Whereas if I was looking at a player like Christopher Bonsu Bar here, I could get a great indication straight away based on his history that he is a top level player. For 4 seasons in a row, he's consistently been getting high average match ratings for Genk, playing really well. You then might look at him and go, actually, he's got a great personality, really high determination rating, he's adaptable, he's consistent, he has everything going for him that you would want in a new signing. Now again, you do need to take into account he's playing for Genk here. In the Belgian divisions, it's going to be harder for him in the Premier League, but it's a very good indicator. If a player's playing well for another club, they'll likely play well for you. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, if you've got a player that's been to a few clubs and isn't quite clicking anywhere, he might not click for you either. So take all of that into account when you are signing players. Don't just look at the starting ability, the potential, and the price. As much as that should matter, you want to look at the bigger picture: consistency, adaptability, injury proneness, natural fitness, determination, personality, how they perform for other clubs. Keep it all in mind, and I promise you, you'll have more success in the transfer market going forward. If you have enjoyed the video, smash the like button, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.